Welcome to another exciting exclusive interview for WU Online. My name is Michael Reaver Jr., and joining me today is the author of Sitting Ringside Volume 1. Please welcome Mr. David Penzer. David, thank you
Hello,
for joining me.
how you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here. Let's chat.
Okay. And
As somebody that you might have heard of once said, "What do you want to talk about?"
and just for the viewers to know, Mr. Penzer's webcam is not acting nice today, so we
You
get
can
to.
put a picture of my book cover on.
Oh, good idea.
There you go.
Let's discuss your autobiography first. What made you decide to write an autobiography, and what made you decide to include the show formats?
And actually, it was the other way around. I never intended to write an autobiography. Good question. Uh, and So I was going through my desk about a year and a half ago, and I found all these old, rare, never before seen formats from WCW, from all the way from '92 or '93 till the last Nitro.
Oh, wow.
And there's some internal memos in there. There's the format where David Arquette wins the world title. Um, so I really didn't know what to do with it. I wanted to try to monetize it, because it's valuable. So I took a picture of one of the covers of one of the WCW Saturday night shows from like '95, and I put it on Twitter and I said, uh, anybody have any idea what to do with this? I have like 200 pages of this.
Oh, wow.
And they said, different people came back and gave me different ideas, how much, to sell it for, how to sell it. But Guy Evans, who wrote the Nitro book, he PM'd me during this whole thing and he said, let's talk tomorrow. Don't do anything until we speak. And so I called him the next morning and he said, why don't we do a scrapbook? We could put all those formats in there, and in between them, you could tell some stories about the guys, your time in WCW, blah, blah, blah. So a scrapbook was born until it became an autobiography. About 3 months in, Guy Evans uh, called me and said, "Hey, we're going to make this an autobiography." I said, "What about the formats? That's the hook." And he goes, "Oh, no, they'll still be in there, but instead of doing it just a scrapbook, I want to do an autobiography." And I said, basically said, "You better be a damn good writer." And luckily, he was a damn good writer. But up until that moment in time, I never had thought. People had asked me, no interest in doing an autobiography, but thankfully he is so talented. He made my story actually entertaining. So you actually get two for the price of one. Some people might buy it for the autobiography and enjoy the formats. Most people will probably buy it for the formats and get around to reading the autobiography, but that's cool.
It's very cool. Um, with the end product being released, did you have any difficulties writing the autobiography?
I didn't really write it. I mean, I just told my story. Guy Evans, we did hours and hours and weeks and months of interviews about different things. He investigated my story, asked a lot of things, you know, um, and so at the end of the day, he took all those, probably hundreds of hours of audio tapes and and wrote a book. As he wrote the Nitro books, so he does have knowledge of WCW and all that went down. So it wasn't completely foreign to him. Um, he was dealing with, my perspective on, what he wrote the ultimate book on. So it was, I think in that vein, it was, it's not like starting from scratch. It's almost like what the story is. Now you want to hear one person's, uh, uh, thoughts and memorances. So I never had to write a thing down. But no, I was so lucky. I've been so lucky to do this for 30 years and on and off and to live my dream, which is what we get into in the book. And you think your luck would run out, but to find a guy like Guy Evans, get it, a guy like Guy, um, uh, to write my autobiography, it's just another blessing in a series of blessings uh, that this crazy ride has been.
And if you haven't read Guy's Nitro book, I highly recommend it. It's just really so interesting.
It blows my mind. I still look at it today, and I'll like go to like a random page, and there'll be like some executive from Turner Broadcasting that I hadn't thought of in 25 years, that spent maybe 2 months with the company, that's mortified that they did and erased it from their resume. And not only have they did Guy get them to go on the record and talk about it, but they were able to tell their stories. And it's I think it's the English accent, quite frankly. If you've never heard it, he has an English accent. But yeah, it's just incredible. It's an incredible book. Uh it's a they have this docu-series coming up, The Rise and Who Killed WCW.
I have.
Uh and his book, and even my book, if you want another person's point of view, would be uh an excellent kind of setup to that docu-series. So you can go to davidpenzerbook.com, davidpenzerbook.com, or you can go to amazon.com. On davidpenzerbook.com, we have some different packages. If you want more than just the book, you could get the last Nitro actually printed out as the format instead of in the book.
Oh, wow.
Um, my goal is to get Ric Flair and Sting someday to sign by their names in
Wow.
that last ever Nitro match and hang it in my office, because that's a cool piece of history. So, maybe get David Arquette, who's I've kept in touch with, to sign, where he won the world title. Interesting enough, on that one, the finish didn't have him winning the world title, but a lot of people like to know how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
And even though, like, you got all these wrestling spoilers and so-called historians and experts and whatever, and I'm not taking away for anything away from anybody. Um, but you know, this is even more of a sneak peek to how the sausage is made. It's cool to get find out who the producers were for WrestleMania. You know what I mean? That's cool. Uh, but to be able to get to see, the background behind the scenes, how it's laid out, uh, I think is a great opportunity. I'm glad I was able to provide.
Yeah, I am one of the people that I love the behind the scenes information. Like when I play WWE 2K24, I go to the universe where I have the options to change the shows and stuff. It's the, like you said, the how the sausage is made that I think is so interesting.
Yeah, I've never played a wrestling video game. I was on one, but I was on Legends of Wrestling too, but uh I never played one. I know my kids do. But yeah, so yeah, it's cool. I would suggest checking it out, davidpenzerbook.com or amazon.com. If you just want the book, it's probably easy to go to Amazon. If you want to check out the bundles, you could go to davidpenzerbook.com.
Okay. And we will have those links at the end of this interview as well.
Thank you, Michael. You're the best.
You're welcome. I haven't unfortunately read your book yet, so I apologize if you've discussed this, but what made you decide to be a ring announcer?
Well, at 11 years old, the age of 11 years old, May of 1977, and this is just a broad overview. We go into much more detail in the book, but I happened to turn on um, noon on Saturdays on Channel 6. Uh, every Saturday at noon on Channel 6, Championship Wrestling from Florida. And I turned that on for the first time, and I was absolutely hooked. Dusty Rhodes, Superstar Billy Graham, Joe LeDuc. I mean, Ox Baker, Ernie Ladd. I mean, great talent. Mike Graham, Steve Kern, Kevin Sullivan. Um, and I fell in love with the whole concept of it. I wasn't smart to it or anything like that, but I fell in love with the whole concept of it. Back then it was a 1 hour show. You couldn't see it on replay, so
Yeah.
you had to be there at sitting in front of your TV at 12 o'clock on Saturday, or else you missed it. And there weren't dirt sheets to give you an overview of what happened. I think I only missed it a couple times in like 10 years. And when I did, I put I put a cassette player next to the TV, and I recorded the audio. But somewhere those tapes still exist, but I'd be hard pressed to find them. But yeah, so that that started it, and I was 11 years old, and as I got older, I did the whole Tony Khan booking my own promotion stuff. I just never got it to TV. um but God bless him for creating something different.
Yeah.
And um and so uh over the years, I've been drawn to a microphone before. um Even when I was a kid in elementary school, I used to do the morning announcements and the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah, in high school, I was there was a radio station. There was a high school down the road from mine when I was a senior that had radio station that was operated by the high school kids, and it was the first of its kind in the country, in the world, really. And so I spent the mornings there because I only had to take English and math. I had all the other credits I needed to graduate, so I spent the mornings there. I did 9 to 11, I think, on the radio station, and then would go pick up something to eat, and then head back for my two classes at the end of the day at the school I graduated from. So me and my friend bought some mobile DJ equipment and some records, and started doing, before you knew it, we were doing weddings and sweet 16s and bar mitzvahs and stuff. So I could always talk on a microphone. I don't know that there was ever a time where I actually sat there and thought maybe I could be a ring announcer, because that's not really how it worked. You had to know somebody.
Okay.
You had to really know somebody. This is, 1988. It was a totally different business. If you didn't get backstage unless you were a wrestler, or you were, the son of a wrestler, and most of them didn't go backstage at that point. The wrestlers didn't even smart up their kids.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, Jeff Jarrett never didn't get smartened up till he got in the business. He sort of guessed a few things, but his just because a lot of the stuff was taped in his backyard, like the Kamala stuff
Yeah.
and videos from Memphis. But yeah, so it was really hard, and I got a lifeline. And one of the things I did say is I could talk on a microphone and be a ring announcer, although I never had. And got my pinky toe in the door through a friend of my dad's, who knew a guy who was running the Global Wrestling Alliance in 1986. It was on the penny stock market, which is, they raised $500,000,
Oh,
and in the height of Hulkamania. And I got my pinky toe in the door, and they invited me to come. They had a school. They had an office in Davie, Florida, with like a school in the back where the warehouse was. And Norman Smiley was breaking in there, learning there. Gangrel, Dave Heath,
oh,
learned there. This is all when they started wrestling school. And the great Malenko was the one who was in charge, and Rusty Brooks was one of the teachers. Guy named Bob Roop was the booker. And so I just started coming around, and it's like, to be honest with you, I was, could I, kissing ass, being a stooge, hey, sir, could I get you a cup of coffee? Would you like me to take out the garbage? Is there anything I could do? And, they'd say, no, go back to the school. If you want to hang out, you could hang out. I got to be friendly with some of those guys, those young guys. And then after a while, just people, some of that top guys, the people in charge started talking to me like, what are you doing here? And why do you come back? And, and I told them, and they had television tapings that they did, and they had a ring announcer that they always used. He was like an Elvis impersonator. So I never did
wow.
TV for them, but I did house shows for them, live events. First one was in Clewiston, Florida. Main event was Iron Sheik against Corporal Kirshner.
Oh,
And
goodness.
and so, I just, through a series of improbable, if not impossible, breaks that I got, I was just able to ride this wave that quite frankly, I never should have gone on. I never should have been allowed to go on based on the rules back then. But for somehow I squeaked in, and when they needed a backup ring announcer for WCW, I happened to be there. I was bringing up enhancement talent every week, and stooging around back there, having people sign in sheets, and running guys for interviews. And so I raised my hand and said, when Tony Schiavone said, we're looking for a backup ring announcer, we're going to bring in some people. I said, I'm bound. He had just come back from WWF and Ross had just left after Bill Watts got fired. So I had talked to Jim Ross about, hey, if you ever need a um, uh, a ring announcer. So he knew, but Tony had just come like 2 weeks earlier, basically taking over the spot that Jim Ross had done, like being in charge of production. So I'd let him know that I'd like to be in the running, and he said, "Okay." I like to say I won by default because I was already going up there every week anyway and doing stuff. But it was terrifying going out there because I kept telling everybody I was a ring announcer, and if I couldn't do what I said I could do, then all this driving up every week for booking fees and stuff didn't make any sense. So I mean, there's really a ton of pressure on me, and like I said, I won by default, and the rest is history. I just rode that wave. I stayed out of people's business. I laid low. I learned to do a ton of things, even though they weren't paying me to do them, just so that God forbid, if Eric Bischoff's brother's nephew, wanted to be a ring announcer, that I would have learned a lot of things that would have made me valuable to stay there with the company. Um, so that was it, and it's 30 years later and still going strong. It's going strong. I finished up with Impact in December,
Mhm.
and had a blast there during COVID and post-COVID, and the crazy couple of years we went through there. But it's still going, and this book is talks about how my story, and then pretty much goes through the end of WCW and my perspective on that disaster.
In the preface, Guy mentioned a volume two. Is there a release date or any details you can tell us
Uh,
about the book?
Sometime in October, it's going to cover the XWF. A lot of people have a lot of questions about the XWF because very little is known and nobody's ever really spoken about it that was involved. I was intimately involved in every facet of everything that happened in the XWF. Uh, so I'm going to get into that. I have a ton of bonus materials that nobody's ever seen before that we're going to put in that. Then we'll get to TNA. We'll get to me being Rowdy Roddy Piper's tour manager and spending 45 days on a tour bus crisscrossing the country with him.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Cool.
that should be interesting. And unfortunately, I have to get into Chris Benoit because I was intimately close to the situation. Uh, and then we'll finish up with TNA and Impact, and uh, I don't know. We'll see. Depending on what happens moving forward, there might be a volume three, but I think volume two will be it.
Yeah. Um, but did is there a school that you go to be a ring announcer, or is it like we need a ring announcer, try it, and depending how you do, yeah, we'll take you.
I don't know that there's a golden rule. I'm sure some schools will take your money if you want to learn how to be a ring announcer. Um, but I don't know exactly what they could teach you. They could get you more comfortable to talk on a mic, and show you how to announce a wrestling show. But if you've been watching wrestling shows and you're a fan, it's just you have to have your own style. You have to entertain the audience in between matches. You need to put over the sponsors. You need to be respectful to the talent, respectful to the top guys, respectful to the owner of the promotion. Like I like to say, there's a fine line between being respectful and kissing ass.
Mhm.
I might have skirted that line a little bit, but doesn't mean in 2024 you have to skirt it. Um, but learn, ask questions. What do you think of this? What did you think of this? Don't take things personally. If somebody says you messed up, you say, I'm sorry, I'm human, I didn't mean to, I'll never do it again. What could I do better? you know and you got to be able to obviously speak on a microphone in front of a crowd. My wife hates speaking on a microphone in front of a crowd, so she wouldn't be a good ring announcer. Um so those kind of things, but there's a lot more opportunities out there today than there were. Well, I'll take it back. There's a lot more opportunities to get your foot in the door, for
Mhm.
sure, a ton more.
Yeah.
But there's not as many. There's not. You got Justin Roberts in AEW, and you got uh Samantha Irvin and Mike Rome, I think his name is, in WWE, and now Jade Chung, who I passed the microphone to in TNA. So, getting to that next level is not as easy, but doesn't mean that it can't happen. You just have to work your ass off, probably at first for very little money, and just do the right thing, and don't ever take anything personally, and you never know what could happen. I got there, and I got there in a world where I wasn't allowed. So uh so now that it's allowed, you never know what happens.
Um, I do have one question about when you were with WCW. I always noticed that it seemed like you couldn't hear the ring announcer a lot, whereas in WWF at the time, you could always hear Howard Finkel. Do you know if that was done on purpose or?
Yeah, it was. We talked about in depth in the book, but basically when I took over, Eric Bischoff came up to me and said, "This is what I want to do, and this is why I want to do it. Are you okay with it?" And I looked at Eric and I said, "You're the boss. You're paying me money to live my dream. I'll do whatever you want me to do. It's not my choice." And so I focus more on the crowd. In between commercial breaks before the show started. I know my voice wasn't on as much, but yeah, there was a reason. I go into it in detail in the book. It makes a lot of sense once you read it.
Okay.
And yeah, like I said, they could have, later on in my career, I was announcing from outside of the ring. So, and that actually pissed me off a little bit, not in WCW, but, so, but at the end of the day, somebody's paying you to do a job that you love, you know, it can't be about you. It has to be about what's best for the person in charge and the people that run the promotion.
Yeah, you and I are so much alike. Um, you talked about your job at the radio station when you were in high school. And when I was in high school, I worked at the Walker, it was called Walker Career Center in Indianapolis. And then you talked about the cassette player. And I remember in 1992, I had a small cassette tape player where I wanted to, it was like the opposite version of VHS tapes. That way, if I wanted to watch wrestling, but I couldn't, I could still listen to it. Wish I had those, but and then
In 1977, there was no indication that a thing called a VHS was going to be made. And I really appreciated when I was, because as I got older and I started having girlfriends, and the girlfriends weren't real thrilled about having to watch wrestling from 6:05 to 8:05 on the Superstation. So I could VHS those and watch it later. But now it's so easy. It's there's so many ways: DVR and video on demand. I remember. I know people that when they put these series out on Hulu and Netflix and stuff. You could watch the whole season in one sitting. When I was younger, I was really into Oz, which, by the way, if nobody's ever watched, now that you can watch it all in one sitting, the whole freaking show, the whole, like, 9 seasons. But I was really into the show called Oz. It was about a prison, and we couldn't watch the whole season, man. There's a cliffhanger every week, and we were like, damn, we can't wait to see what happens next. And
yeah.
you know, then so it's just a totally different world, and much easier to navigate, certainly. Um, so that's convenient, certainly.
Yeah, I was thinking the other day, there literally is a wrestling show on every night of the week now.
Yeah, you're right.
And
Um,
go ahead. And
no,
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you're absolutely right. Monday you got Raw, Tuesday NXT, which is the one thing I don't DVR.
Mhm.
I probably should. Wednesday's AEW. You're right. Friday's AEW, Saturday's AEW. Sunday is there's nothing on. Well, I guess most of the time, I think it's USA, or I'm not exactly sure where it airs. Has the documentaries about the talent and the rivals stuff.
Yeah, that's
So
USA.
Really, really it is. And if there, if not, there's probably a pay-per-view on that you could watch. And so that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I remember growing up, you had, if you were a WWF fan, you had Superstars Saturday, Challenge and Spotlight Sunday, and usually prime time was either Monday and Tuesday, and that's it.
Well,
And
don't forget Tuesday Night Titans, the talk show.
yes, very, very interesting talk show.
So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of wrestling back then too. It just aired differently. You would on a Saturday night block, you could see championship wrestling from Florida, WWF Superstars, World Class, AWA. Um, you know, uh, they had a show called, I don't know if you remember, but This Week in Wrestling with Joe Pedicino, that basically got tapes from all the territories and aired them. So that it was sort of a quick 1 hour jolt around the business, which was really cool. And
Wow.
so yeah, but they were usually in blocks. They weren't on different nights. So actually, that's probably more convenient,
Yeah.
especially when you're doing it via DVR as opposed to uh, not. I mean, via VHS as opposed to DVR, because DVR was a little bit more. You actually had to press the tape button and
Yeah.
uh, yeah, and stuff. So it was a little more difficult to navigate. So I don't know that if we still were using VHSs, I don't know that I would have probably record as many things as I do on DVR, because you have to remember every week, and there's no set it and forget it type of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Uh, Going back to you deciding you wanted to be a ring announcer, were there any ring announcers either in wrestling or another sport that inspired you to either emulate you or just inspired you?
Howard Finkel, the best of all time, not even close. Um, Howard, every month on MSG Network, Madison Square Garden Network, they would show the Madison Square Garden show on that network. And right before the last match, which actually wasn't the main event went on before intermission. But right before the last match, which was usually like the semi-main event, usually something like a 6-man tag team match with Andre in one side. Um, Howard Finkel would announce the matches for the next show at Madison Square Garden. It was my favorite part of the entire show. It was my favorite part of the entire week, or month. I look forward to it because he was so good at it.
Mhm.
Uh, I wish I could explain it in more details, but I really can't. Uh, it just had you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
Um, and he would sometimes the main event would be really great, and you'd be like, yeah. And sometimes he'd go, and ladies and gentlemen, WWF World Champion Bob Backlund will defend the title next month right here in Madison Square Garden against Samoan #1. And you'd go, yeah. And then you'd be like, that sucks. But Howard sold it so well, you'd be like, yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I never emulated him as far as trying to sound like him. I wanted to do my own thing, but to me, he's the Mount Rushmore, all four faces of the ring announcers, and uh, sorely missed. I got to spend a little time with Howard after WCW closed, and really happy that I did. Great guy, loved the business as much as I did, and if not more, which I think is probably impossible. So yeah, great guy. And Gary Michael Capetta helped me out a lot in WCW, but Howard Finkel was the guy for me when I was growing up as a kid.
Yeah, I don't think anyone can say and you like he could.
No, you can't. No, you can't. I don't even try to. I just try to be me.
Ren, I did get a sample of your book, and you mentioned that you organized a presidential primary when you were, I believe, 10. Um,
I was in fourth grade, so figure it out. I don't know.
yeah. Um, what made you interested in politics? Because I can't imagine kids today wanting to be so interested in politics.
Well, because it's so horrifying. It was just a tad more congenial than it is now. No, now you'd be suspended for in elementary school for doing a presidential primary. Um, uh, but No, I was always I read the newspaper every day. Uh, first it was the Sun Sentinel, the Fort Lauderdale Sun Sentinel, and then once USA Today came out, I subscribed to that. Read that every day. I watched the 6 o'clock news every day on Channel 10 ABC down in South Florida. I just was into that. I don't know why, and I'm still into it. I still, if I'm working from home, the news is on all day. I may not be paying attention all the time, but if I glance up and see something, I might turn the volume up. And uh, I don't know. It's just always something I've been, a fan of, and it was never like a conscious thing. I think that was probably it was Jimmy Carter versus Gerald Ford. It was probably the first presidential election that I, could, in fourth grade, you're finally starting to realize, okay, this is what happens every 4 years in November. And I don't know, maybe it came from a conversation with a teacher or my parents, but the whole assignment was you had to go home, you had to speak to your parents, you had to find out. God, if I knew then what I know now, I would have never have done this. But I was naive fourth grader who thought that and maybe back in the time it was true that your parents would actually go, okay, well, this is what Jimmy Carter does and believes in, and this is what Gerald Ford believes in. What do you believe in? But I like to hope that back in those days, at least, it was like that. That was the goal, was to educate other people about who was going to be president and see what their values were. Um, and I didn't think it out that much. I just did it and ran with it. And now looking back, it's easy to reflect on a bunch of stuff. But you're the first person in like 25, 30 interviews in the last couple of weeks that's asked me about that.
Really?
Um, yeah. And so yeah, that was cool. And I'm still a political junkie. It's a little harder to keep score these days. And uh, but uh, but yeah, that's what happened. And I think I say in the book, probably if that would have happened 20 years later, I'd either been thrown in jail, or I'd be like on Good Morning America or CNN or something, because that doesn't happen a lot. Um, at least one more thing on the five. But yeah, that's what happened. And I don't know. I was never really encouraged. It was just something I was always interested in.
Oh, it's very cool that you did. Um, let's switch to WCW. You are one of the few individuals who saw WCW before, during, and after the Monday Night War. If you could you just reflect on that and tell us, like, what you liked the best, if you could narrow it down, and what you did not like during that period?
It was a roller coaster when I first got there. They were changing bookers all the time. For example, they'd bring Bill Watts in, and Bill Watts did Mid-South Wrestling, which was one of the greatest wrestling promotions and 1 hour television shows in the world. So when Bill Watts came in, everybody thought, all right, this is finally it. WCW is going to get saved. It's going to be, it's going to be incredible. Then he did, I don't know what he was thinking, but he did, and quite frankly, I didn't, I just at that point I didn't even look at Bill Watts. I looked down when I walked past him, hoping he wouldn't ask who the hell I was and why I was there, because I wasn't a ring announcer yet. But uh, he came in and he like took the mats off the floor like anybody cared, and he wouldn't let people jump off the top rope. And this is when guys like Liger and Brian Pillman and Brad Armstrong were starting to do some really cool things. And he cut the budget hugely, because the rumor is his deal was that he made a percentage of the money that he saved or money that he made. And it was a huge disappointment. And then, we went, through the Ole Andersons, who, a lot of people didn't like Ole, but I respected Ole. The Dusty Rhodes, who's, I'm one of the biggest Dusty Rhodes fans, as both as a performer and a human being of all time. And he's one of my heroes. But it was tough because there was never any real clear direction. The Turner suits hated us. The only reason we were on the air is because Turner wanted us there, and Turner wasn't totally in charge at the time. And the fateful story about Eric going up and meeting with Turner and all the executives, and they said, "What do you need to be competitive?" And Eric just blurted out, "Live head to head on Monday night." We all thought he was nuts when he came back when we heard that. Uh, but turns out he was brilliant. Um, I think he kind of thought he was nuts when he first said it, and Turner first said okay, but but it worked. And that first Nitro when Luger came out after he'd just done a show like in the other side of the country in Canada with WWE. He was working without a contract, and he just showed up. And then Scott Hall walking down the steps in Macon, Georgia, grabbing my mic, started in the
Yeah.
NWO, and all the things that happened after that. It just really took off. It was exciting. It was fun. Everybody was in it as a team. Let's work hard together and keep this thing going. And then it sort of fell apart. A lot of egos got in the way. Eric was totally burnt out, so he went home for a little bit. The person they brought in to replace him, while I'd have nothing against him personally, I don't think he did a good job as a wrestling writer. I go in depth about that in the book, and so that's probably what I was the most unhappy or disappointed with. And then once Turner lost power. He went from having 100% ownership to having 50% ownership. When you're 50% ownership, you might be able to still have the last word. When you're 33 and a third percent ownership, you don't have the last word anymore. So I didn't know it at the time, and it's probably good I didn't. But even if we would have been doing great and making hundreds of millions of dollars, they were going to get rid of the company. They didn't. Nobody in that building wanted anything to do with wrestling except for Ted Turner, and obviously the Eric Bischoffs of the world and people who work for WCW. But as far as the upper management, they were embarrassed by it. And later in the history of the show, I could see why they were embarrassed by it, but they were embarrassed by it before it became a zoo.
Yeah.
So so anyway, and that's one of the cool things about Guy's book is it made me realize, it wasn't the writing or the talent going home or the management. I'm talking about WCW management, not Turner management. Shakeups that caused it, although it certainly didn't help it. It was going to happen anyway. We just didn't know it, which is I'm glad I didn't know it because I would have scared the living bejesus out of me. And so I found out about 3 days before the last Nitro that it was going to be the last Nitro and that we sold the company to WWF. And go into detail on that in my book. And then, my dream was over for then, and somehow I was able to resurrect it, which is even cooler. So that's sort of the overview.
Was there any talks at all with about you going to WWF, or were you just gonna take a break?
No, luckily I had 8 months severance pay, full severance pay, which saved my ass. I mean, I had 2 young kids and a wife that didn't work. Um, uh, I did meet with Jim Ross after the company was sold in a hotel in Marietta, and he did say that at the time the plan was for WCW to be a separate brand, and if and when it became that, if they went forward with that, they wanted me to be the ring announcer. And I said, okay, but they weren't paying me. And then eventually it became evident that wasn't going to happen. So, I got a lucky break, which is probably how the book ends, volume 1. And then we'll get into what that break was in volume 2. But to continue doing what I was doing. So, God, so many things had to go right for my story to be what it is today. And it's just incredible. I'm very blessed and humbled that I get to do this. I get to be a part of this fraternity for 30 years.
It's just I say it in every interview. I don't think there's any other form of entertainment that is everything combined in one, like professional wrestling.
I would tend to agree. Um, yeah, I mean, spoilers. See, I'm not one of these guys that say I hate that people put out spoilers because people have money, a job to do, money to be made, and if there's people that want to read them, as long as they're marking them as spoilers, then they have every right to put them out. I don't like when they put them out and they don't mark them as spoilers, but and I'm guilty of that too. And I'm one of these guys that likes to be surprised, man. Imagine if nobody knew Jordan Grace was coming out in the Royal Rumble. We all knew it, and it was still super cool. But imagine if nobody knew. But yeah, I clicked on that spoiler because I wanted to know, because everybody wants to know everything and nobody wants to be surprised, and I'm guilty of that too. Um, but you know, that's just the way, it's sort of, one of the ways of the world. And then the world is always adjusting and changing, and the country and the technology. And yeah, so I try not to hit the thing, but there's something in me that wants to know. Everybody has to know, fear of missing out. Um, so so yeah, I mean, I wish they weren't there, but I do respect the ones who at least mark it as a spoiler and give you the opportunity to decide whether you want to read it or not.
Did you watch the invasion when it was taking place?
WCW and the WWE, that invasion?
Yes.
From my memory, yeah, I guess I would have, but from my memory, it didn't last very long. Um, they had a couple of small things, and showing the guys up in a skybox, and then they had that Booker T versus Buff Bagwell match, and that was the end. So uh so yeah, it didn't for I maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but I would think that it only lasted maybe, I mean, I don't think it even actually ever became a real war. Uh, I think they realized quickly that that the talent that they needed to have a war with WWE, who was hot as on fire at the time, was all under different contracts where they could sit home and collect their money, and Vince didn't want to buy them out. And in hindsight, he didn't have to buy all of them out. But if he would have bought like Sting, he had Booker. If he would have bought Sting out and Flair out, I think between Booker, Sting, and Flair, and the guys behind him and them, as far as who they had, they could have had a war. But he didn't want to, and that's his prerogative. And they got to sit home and collect their money, which is, I'm sure they enjoyed. So to my recollection, it never really ended up being a war. It sort of was like a threat of a war that never happened.
Yeah. I'm gonna say several names one at a time. Well, not names, but words. And I'd like you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind.
I'm really bad at this, but I'll try.
Okay. Ring announcing.
Oh, I'm so bad at this. Uh, Blessed.
WCW.
Roller coaster.
Gordon Soley.
Legend.
Eric Bischoff.
Misunderstood for a long time.
Vince Russo.
Not good at what he did. That's nothing personal.
Chris Benoit.
Uh, a disgrace.
Vince McMahon.
Never met the guy. But he did a lot for the business, obviously. And without WrestleMania, we wouldn't all be sitting here. So he's made a lot of mistakes, and he suffered the consequences. But he was ingenious in a lot of ways, especially in the beginning of this whole crazy ride called the wrestling boom.
Did you ever imagine he would not even have one stock in the company he made?
Has he sold them all?
He sold them all.
No, but you just can't predict that kind of stuff. We live in a world where everything gets recorded, or everything gets anything that you put on the internet, or anything that you put on your phone as a text or a phone call, they could go in and find it even if you delete it.
Yeah.
So, and certainly I am certainly not, and I don't want to get anybody to think defending any of this. What happened was what he's accused of, at least we don't know what really happened, but what he's accused of and what it looks like happened was horrible, if true. And you can't survive in 2024 in this world after that kind of stuff becoming public in a corporate environment, or even really any environment. You become canceled, and Vince McMahon has been canceled. And we'll see if the reason was good, or if he has a different story to tell that he could prove. I'm not going to judge anybody before they have their time to be able to plead their case.
Yeah.
but it certainly doesn't look good from 100 miles up on the air. And uh, they're moving on without him, because the key to WrestleMania, if you hadn't picked it up, was this is the Triple H era, which means it's no longer the Vince McMahon era. Um, so so yeah, I don't know if I could ever imagine that he wouldn't have any stock in the company. I think it's a sad fall for a guy who did a lot of good. Uh, but I wonder what his life's like now, and I don't know, but he can't be happy. Um, so I'm not sure, but yeah, it's sad. It's sad, and if it was his fault and it was caused by him, then he deserves it.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's still sad either way.
It is. I tell my friends, I think it's so sad that a man who has done so much, whether he did it or he didn't, this is what he's going to be remembered for, and it's just sad.
Well, that's the world we live in 2024. Do I love it all the time? No, but I play by the rules. You know, I don't talk politics, even though I'm a political junkie on social media. I don't get in arguments with people, and cause all kinds of crap. I don't get tribal, like TNA is the greatest and AEW should go out of business. I don't understand that perspective. Everybody should be rooting for everybody. I understand if you don't like something, then don't watch it.
It's
There's promotions in this business that I don't necessarily like, and I don't watch them. Um, but doesn't mean I don't hope that they're successful. Uh, but it's a different world we live in, and you know what? That's going to happen. Time changes everything, and you just have to be careful, man. You have to be careful what you do. You have to be careful what you say. You got to be careful of how you act. You got to, be careful of what you post. Um, and as long as you're cognizant of that, and you do the right thing, and I think you'll be okay. But if you don't do the right thing, or and it gets out, well, then that's going to be ugly. And is it right? I don't know. In some instances, it's 100% right. In some instances, I think that it's more of again, a tribal thing that's killing, especially in this business. Um, I forget the name of the wrestler that and I'll get heat for this, but I forget the name of the wrestler that had been canceled uh, because when he was a young wrestler and worked in England, and ended up, it came out he had sex with a 17-year-old girl who was in the bar drinking and lied about her age.
oh wow.
Well, uh, it's a pretty Marty
Oh,
Skrull. And and if that's not true, if that story's a lie, then I take it all back. But that was the story that everybody seemed to agree on. And if we come to a place in this world where you have to, if you meet a girl in the bar and you're single, and the girl expresses that she'd like to go back to her room, and you have to ID her and card her to bring her up there. Look, if the girl was 12, it's pretty obvious, but she's down there. Obviously, they thought she was legal. She was 17, legal was 18. So, I mean, we're splitting hairs there on the law. It could be months, it could have been weeks, it could have been days, but until she would have been. But he got canceled because of that. Now, again, if my story, understanding of the story is wrong, then I take that back. But if that's the story, I find that scary.
mhm.
And I'm very happy that I've been happily married for 30 years, and don't
Congratulations.
have to live in that world where you have to ID somebody for to hook up with them. So uh but like that is, it's the like I said, it's the world we live in, and you could either say screw it and get canceled, or you could abide by it and live your life. And there's things behind closed doors you could do if they're the right thing to do that nobody has to know about. But as long as they're the right thing to do, it's your doors that are closed.
What I know we're getting off topic, but um, what do you think of like the Hulk Hogan situation where he was in his own home and someone was videotaping him? Do you know the story I'm talking about?
Yeah, I don't think he was in his home. I think he was in Bubba the Love Sponge's home.
Oh,
But I'm not 100% sure, because there's rumors that Bubba has tapes of all kinds of celebrities doing that. Um, yeah, that happened, right here in Tampa where I'm at. Look, nobody's perfect. I said that earlier. He was in a really bad time in his life, really down time. I don't know what was associated with that as far as if he was, doing drugs or, having, being depressed or, as somebody who's battled anxiety and panic attack for 40 years, you never really know what somebody's going through. I did a interview the other night with a full-on panic attack, and it's probably one of the best ones I've done since we started this journey. And then afterwards, I texted Guy. I said, "Did you hear any of that?" He goes, "Yeah, I was listening a little bit." I said, "I do you believe I did that with a full-on panic attack?" And he's like, "Oh my God, now I understand what you're talking about in the book." Because we go into that subject a lot. So I can't judge somebody. I don't, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. I don't know what state of mind he was in. I know it wasn't good. The one thing I could tell you is I've seen Hulk Hogan do incredible things where no cameras were there, where the word never got out, and he made families and people, their, lives who didn't have a good life. Um, so I can only judge by what I see when there's no cameras there and when there's nobody to benefit, but you're doing a good thing for deserving people, and that's how I see that. Others will disagree, and that's okay. Um, we're not all supposed to agree on everything, but that's my opinion.
Okay. The next word is Dixie Carter.
Uh, geez. Uh, nice person, but a mark.
TNA.
Underrated.
WWE.
On a roll.
David Penzer.
Blessed. Absolutely blessed. Uh, can't say anything else.
Well, before we close this interview, is there anything you would like to say to your fans and where your fans can find you online?
Yeah, I'm at on Twitter at David Penzer. Like I said, no political BS, no arguing. We just talk some wrestling, talk some music. I'm a big live music fan. Uh, I'll post a picture or something and have a good time enjoying what we love. And you can go to davidpenzerbook.com if you want to see what those bundles are. Pretty cool bundles. And we've sold a lot of them, so obviously there's a lot of people interested, way more than I would have ever thought. Um, and or if you're not interested in that and you just want to read the book, get the book, you could go to Amazon. Either site is the same price with free shipping, so it's the same thing. But I just appreciate everybody that was along for my ride, and for those who were a fan or are a fan, I appreciate that. For those who weren't or aren't, that's cool too. I got to live my dream for 30 years, and I continue to do so. And there's not much more you could say about that. It's just incredible. And anybody that was a part of it, that was on it for a part of the way or the whole way, or I appreciate you joining me.
David, I would like to thank you for joining me today. I would like to remind fans that David's new autobiography, Sitting Ringside Volume 1, is now available at guyevansbooks.com and davidpenzerbook.com.
They're actually go to the same website.
Okay.
Talk about how the sausage is made.
If you haven't purchased your copy yet, please do so because I imagine they'll be sold out soon. And the sample I read, it is a very interesting book. You are so honest, like you mentioned, with the mental health aspect, and from someone that suffers the same uh ailments, if you will. I appreciate reading what someone else goes through.
Well, I like to say the mind is a very powerful tool, and not always in a good way, sometimes in a very, very bad way, unfortunately. And you know, without getting too off topic or too inside baseball, um, I went through some really hard times, and there's probably not a day that goes by that at some point I don't feel a tinge of anxiety. Um, but you learn to live with it, But there were times where I was convinced I was never going to be normal again. I was never going to, it was never going to go away. And, if there's other people out there that feel that, I understand your pain, and I understand any thoughts that go along with that, of maybe not wanting to feel that way for the rest of your life. If you're out there and you're listening, you will not feel that way for the rest of your life. There's help out there. There's medication out there, and it's as good as it's ever been. Um, Not to say you'll never, feel bad, or go have an up and down, as as far as mental health goes, but you will feel better. And it is worth sticking around, because you only live once. So if anybody's out there that is feeling, like they need to talk to somebody, talk to a pastor, talk to a friend, talk, if you can't, don't, you can reach out to me. If you don't have anybody to reach out to, call one of those hotlines. There's somebody always waiting to help you and figure out how to get it to the next day, and try to work on finding out how to feel better. So that's very important to me, and I just wanted to say that since you brought it up. So thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you for all of you for watching, and God bless Mr. Penzer, his family. Thank you, Guy Evans, for arranging this interview, and God bless you and your family.